Hey, Bio 1 students. Glad to see you again. Again, we finished up on this slide. I know we have this slide already, but I kind of want to start at this point and talk about the 4 steps. And remember, I talked about this in the last video. 4 events. So all 4 of these are taking place at the same time. So occurs in the grana, if you remember, those little stacks, green stacks of poker chips. Hydrogen we're going to use, as you will see, and oxygen we're going to give off as a waste product. So we're going to start with steps 1 and 2. We call that photosystem 1. And then we'll finish up the video talking about steps 3 and 4, which is photosystem 2. All right. So let's look at these. And again, don't think sequencing. That'll mess you up. These are 4 things occurring at the same time. Okay. So on that second tab, okay, so kind of follow along here. Let me bring that back up again, just so you have a little reference. We're talking about these 4 steps right here. So we're going to do this left side, and this is going to set the table for this side over here that we'll talk about on Monday, next week's videos. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to get everything in place, and then we're going to use it over here, and you'll see there's photosystem 1 and steps 1 and 2, photosystem 2, steps 3 and 4. Okay, so let's kind of go through those. So that's what we're going to fill in. So open those tabs up. We're going to highlight what's in red on the back of those tabs. We're going to put these steps, and you can use this on the test. I do have a video. I do have a Google slideshow on your Google Classroom. It shows you how to make foldable. So please do that. And it really doesn't matter what size of paper you use. Bigger the better, but just make sure you do that. Okay. So here we go. So let's just jump right in, and let's talk about steps 1 and 2. So photosystem 1. First thing that's going to happen is a photon of light is going to come down. We have a color sheet on that, and it says pow and zap. Looks like a comic strip type of notation. And light's coming in at 187,000 miles per second, which is hard to fathom. So it's got a lot of power. When it hits that plant, it's going to set all this stuff into motion at once. Okay, so that's what they're trying to emphasize on your color sheet that you have. They're trying to show you, and I have this kind of broken up on the 2 sides that we're going to do today. So you can kind of see. Let me show you real quick. Let me find the right one. Hopefully this is the right one. Yeah. So nope, we're down too far. Try this one. Okay. So you should have this one, and we're talking about this beam of light right here. Okay. So light's coming down. You can see the word zap, and we're going to set this into motion. Okay. What happens when this photon of light hits that plant? That's a good question. Okay. What's going to happen is chlorophyll gets energized. You've probably seen those commercials on TV where the little Energizer bunny hitting the drums, right? He's all excited. That's pretty much what chlorophyll is going to do. We literally take the chlorophyll atom, and these electrons get knocked away from the nucleus, sometimes even clear out of orbit. And it takes more energy to hold them further away than in close. That's where this that chemistry chapter comes in pretty handy. And what we're going to do is take all that energy that these chlorophyll have just absorbed, and we're going to transfer it into something that the plant can use, and luckily you and I can use. So here comes this diagram we talked about in notes the other day. Here comes ATP. So this energy from this chlorophyll getting energized is going to be stored in this ATP molecule. Put a box around that. I'll explain that in a minute. Okay. So all we've done, don't make this complicated. We've taken this electron, think of that as energy. We've tagged on a phosphate, and we made ADP, 2 phosphates into 3, and we trap that energy right here. Let me highlight that. We trap that energy right there in that high energy bond. Okay, we can put that on the shelf. You'll use it later. We'll talk about it in another reaction. Okay, so that's the first thing that happens. Okay, so ATP is made from the energy from the sun. So ultimately, the sun is what's giving you that energy to put that phosphate on. That's what photosynthesis how it's different than respiration. We'll use food to do that. They use sunlight or artificial light, whatever, okay? The other thing that happens, okay, so that's one thing that happens in photosystem 1. The second thing that happens is, and again, not sequencing, it's happening at the same time, is we're going to take this compound right here, and you don't have to worry about what this word means. It simply means we're going to use the abbreviation NADPH, and we're going to add 2 hydrogens to it. I'll show you where all that stuff comes from later, okay? Now, what's important is, well, let me explain this a little bit. So it stands for this big long word, nicotide, diethylamide, diphosphate, but we don't care about that, right? Think of it as a hydrogen acceptor. It's in the chloroplast, it sits there, and it's waiting for 2 hydrogens. So NADP, back to that chemistry chapter, NADP is needs 2 electrons because its outer valence electrons aren't filled. It's going to get 2 electrons from hydrogen, which has 1 each. Remember that from chemistry, I hope, right? So we're basically going to tag that on. This is really simple. And then we get this stuff called NAD. Let me fix this a little bit. Called NADPH2, right? So we simply are going to take NADP, and we're just going to tag 2 hydrogens on it. Okay, I don't know what happened to my 2, so sorry about that. Okay, thought I was going to fix it, maybe not. So that's basically the only thing that happens there. So now we have this NADPH2. So put a box around that. I don't know what happened to my 2. I'm messing things up more than I'm helping here. Okay. So that's basically what we're going to do with that compound. Okay. Don't worry about what we use it for. We'll use it later. See if I can get this fixed. Yeah, I'll fix it later. There we go. Let me get that 2 in there so you're not confused. All right, so basically that's what's going to happen. All right. So in summary, what happened in the photosystem 1? 2 things are produced that we're going to use later. We're going to use ATP. We're going to put it on the shelf and use it for energy later in another part of the reaction. In this NADPH2 we're going to make, that's why when you put boxes around these, we're going to use that later on in the reaction. Okay? Setting the table. We're not doing anything yet, but we're getting everything in place so that we're ready when the time comes and we have these things there to use. Okay? Hopefully so far so good. Okay, so we made 2 things. All right, put those, all you got to do is what I have in red. That's what's going to go in the back of those 2 tabs. All right? The last 2 tabs on your foldable is called Photosystem 2. And what we're going to do in Photosystem 2 is this should look eerily familiar. It starts out the very same way. Light energizes Photosystem 2 as well. So if you go to your color sheet, you'll notice there's 2 arrows that come down, and they look like this, right? This is the second one. They're both the same. And you'll notice the diagrams are the same because we're doing the same exact step. I'll explain that more later because somebody might ask. You might be sitting there thinking, well, if they do the same thing, why is there a step 1 and 3? Why don't we just put them in one step? I'll show you that in a second. But they're basically going to, if you know one, you know the other. So same thing happens. Chlorophyll gets all excited. We knock those electrons around, and we're going to make some more ATP. Okay? So ATP is made for a second time. Okay? Might not be a bad idea to put a square around that box as well, or that ATP. So let's just do that real quick. We're going to put a box around it as well. Okay. So let me fix that too. Sorry, I just never realized that my notes weren't ready to go, but we'll fix it. All right. So put a box around that one as well. Okay. There we go. Now let's make that red. Boom. Okay. Make that a little bit bigger. There you go. So put a box around that. So we made ATP. In fact, let's make that red too. We have basically, well, we'll do that later. I'm not going to get you confused here. Okay. That's basically what we're doing with step 1. or step 3, I should say. Okay, same as step 1. Now, here's what's interesting. Okay, and this is why it's a separate step from step 1, even though we're accomplishing the same thing. We're making ATP, and we'll use it later. You'll see where it comes in. Look at this, the part 2, is number 2 here. What it's going to do is, since we used up electrons making ATP in step 1, we got to put them back. So this step puts the electrons back that we lost in the first photosystem. Okay? Think of a grocery store. If you buy everything off the shelf, hopefully at night that grocery store puts the product back on the shelf the next day, so when you come in the next day or somebody comes in, they have product to buy, right? If we don't put these electrons back and we don't restock the shelf, they're going to run out and this is going to shut down and the plant's not going to live. Okay? Now, there's an old saying, you may have never heard this saying before, but I had a grandfather used to always say, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And what that means, you're stealing from this person to pay this person. So you fix one problem, but guess what? You've created another problem, right? That's what happens here. So if these guys give their electrons to step 1, where are they going to get electrons? This right here, so they can function. That's where step 4 comes in. So a plant is really good at putting stuff back that it uses. It's not like I have to go out there and say, oh, I'm going to sprinkle some ATP on you. I'm going to sprinkle some NADP on you. That just stays in the system. They just recycle this stuff over and over and over again. But in step 3, there comes a point where you can't recycle anymore, so you're going to have to bring something in from the outside. And that's why step 4, as you will see here in notes, this is non-cyclic. Okay? So we basically, this is the part that we have to put back into the system. Okay? You guys all know this. If I have a plant, there's only 2 things I really need to do if I have a house plant to keep it alive. Put it in the sun, give it a light source, and water it. Right? So that's the 2 things that's not recyclable. You got to keep putting light in, and you got to keep putting water in. Everything else just gets recirculated around the plant, if that makes sense, in this reaction. All right? So let's wrap this up. So let's do the last tab. So in step 4, where water is going to be split, it's called photolysis. Sun comes in and splits water into H2 and oxygen. So let's kind of look at this diagram, and you'll see how all this kind of fits together like a puzzle. Okay? So good old H2O over here is basically going to be split into half, and since there's only 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, what happens? 3 things are given off. 2 hydrogen, an oxygen, and electrons. That's important, right? Electrons. Oh, that's where I'm going to replace these up here, right? Since step 3 replace step 1's electrons, this is going to put electrons back for step 3. Everything's got to be restocked, right? So you see that here, okay? So that's what we're going to do with that one, right? And then what happens, and I'm going to have to fix this slide a little bit. It's going a little bit off. Let me see if I can fix this a little bit. So sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. So what are the 2 hydrogens used for? We know where this goes, right? Step 2. So that's where the 2 hydrogens come from. This isn't a magic act. It's not like we're pulling a rabbit out of the hat. These things have to come from somewhere, okay? And that's why you can't think sequencing. Now you see why. Step 4, it's got to give step 2 stuff. So step 2 happens before step 4. That's not going to work. All this stuff happens at the same time, okay? So I got my 2 hydrogens put in. I got my electrons replaced, and the only thing left is this oxygen, which, thank goodness, the plant doesn't need, doesn't want for photosynthesis, so it just releases it into the air, and you and I are breathing in it as we speak, okay? So what we have is these things called stomatas. Let me put this picture up. And these open and close. So during the day, they close. At night, they open up. If you remember osmosis chapter we talked about, if the water and photosynthesis is in full gear, turgor pressure, they close. Think of 2 water balloons coming together. Then at night, they relax because photosynthesis isn't going like it was during the day because the light's not there. And these open up, and oxygen goes out these holes. CO2 comes in these same holes. We'll talk about that in the next set of notes. And oxygen goes out. And also water vapor goes out. Okay, so that's why we have so much humidity in the wonderful state of Indiana in the summertime, right? So you can see how everything kind of fits together, all right? So hopefully that makes sense. Fill this out on your foldable on the left side. We're going to do the right side, and we'll split that up in a couple different days of notes. So I know we only got a couple slides left. I'm going to break it up into a couple days of video notes so that we don't throw too much at you at once. I threw a lot at you right here. Hopefully it makes sense. If it doesn't, feel free to contact me, email me, do whatever you need to so I can help you out understanding this. So that's it. So we'll put some more notes on later, and hopefully we can get this wrapped up. We'll take a test next week. All right. Hey, have a good week, and we'll talk to you later. See you. Bye.